The cold wind howled against the rusted metal of the gate, rattling the makeshift barricade that held back the dead. Inside the compound, a handful of survivors stood tense and silent, their eyes fixed on the flickering shadows beyond the tall fences. The night was thick with silence, too thick. Mara tightened her grip on the worn shotgun, her breath shallow and quick. She had learned early in Dead America that silence was never peace, it was the quiet before a storm. Beside her, Jace scanned the perimeter, his fingers twitching nervously on the pistol's grip. Then, faintly, a sound pierced the stillness, a crunch of footsteps on gravel. Heads snapped toward the gate. Two figures emerged from the darkness, limping and dragging a battered backpack behind them. One held a tattered flashlight, its beam flickering weakly. "Wait," Mara whispered. Strangers. The survivors had agreed long ago, no one new was allowed inside without proof of who they were. The dead were not the only danger out here, humans could be far worse. Jace stepped forward, voice low but firm. "Identify yourselves." The taller stranger lifted a hand, his voice hoarse and tired. "Please, we mean no harm. We're just looking for shelter. The dead are everywhere out there. We have nowhere else to go." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Why come here? What makes you think we'll open the gate?" "We heard the signal," the shorter stranger said, voice trembling. "Radio static, a call for survivors." The gate was heavy and fortified, barbed wire crisscrossed over the rusted steel, wood planks jammed into cracks. But no one was eager to open it now, not without knowing if these strangers were friend or foe. A murmur spread through the small crowd inside the compound. Some whispered about recent raids on nearby settlements. Others spoke of desperate bandits disguised as refugees. Mara's heart hammered, could they risk their safety for these unknown people? "Who sent the signal?" Mara demanded. "How do we know you're not leading more dead to our door?" The taller man's eyes flickered with something like fear or desperation. "We don't know. We just heard it, some crackling voice, calling survivors to the town. It sounded like hope." Jace studied them carefully. His gut twisted with doubt. Hope is a rare thing in this world. Sometimes, it's bait. Suddenly, a sharp noise echoed from the forest behind the gate, a low groan, wet and hungry. The survivors froze as shadows shifted in the trees. Mara raised her shotgun, her finger tightening on the trigger. The strangers flinched. "They're close," the shorter one whispered. "We barely escaped." Mara looked at Jace, then back at the gate. The compound was secure, but only barely. They had lost 3 people last week, killed from inside by a traitor who opened a back door for the dead. Trust was thin. "We can't just leave them out there," Mara said. "But if we let them in without knowing their story, we're inviting trouble." The group leader, an older man named Sam, stepped forward. His weathered face was lined with years of hardship. "We've survived this long by being cautious. Let's bring them inside, one at a time. Keep eyes on them. No weapons. No secrets." The gate creaked as Sam unlocked the heavy chain and pulled it open just enough for one person to slip through. The tall stranger stepped inside, eyes darting around. The shorter one followed, clutching his backpack close. Inside, the survivors circled them quickly, searching for signs of weapons or hidden dangers. The newcomers flinched under the scrutiny but said nothing. "We'll need to quarantine them, check for infection," Sam ordered. "No exceptions." As the gate closed behind them, the sound of distant groaning grew louder, the dead shifting closer to the fence line. Mara scanned the faces of her group. Fear mingled with exhaustion. The strangers were no guarantee of safety, but neither was isolation. Suddenly, a faint crackle came through the static on the survivors' old radio, a voice, distant and broken, calling out, "Help, survivors, come to the gate." Mara's heart skipped. The radio was never clear at this hour. Was it a warning? A trap? Or something worse? "Who can you trust in Dead America?" she whispered to herself. The answer was still hidden in the shadows beyond the gate. That's part 1. The newcomers were kept under watch, separated from the main group in an old storage shed that smelled of damp wood and rusted metal. Mara and Jace took turns sitting just outside the door, eyes sharp and guns ready. The night stretched on, thick with unanswered questions. Inside, the taller stranger, who had introduced himself as Elias, sat slumped against the wall, exhaustion etched deep into his face. His companion, the shorter one named Liam, paced nervously, glancing through the cracked windows as if expecting the dead to burst through at any moment. Sam had ordered a thorough search of their belongings before allowing them any freedom. Nothing obvious was found, no weapons, no explosives, no signs of infection. But trust was a fragile thing, especially now. Mara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Days passed under tense truce. The strangers kept their heads down, helping with chores but never fully earning the survivors' trust. Jace, however, was growing suspicious. Small things, misplaced tools, strange noises at night, a hidden radio he caught Liam fiddling with, hinted at secrets beneath their weary exteriors. One afternoon, Mara was on patrol near the gate when she noticed a faint trail of footprints leading away from the compound. The prints were fresh, too large to be from the dead, and they disappeared into the woods in the opposite direction from where the strangers claimed they'd come. Her heart quickened. Had one of them slipped out? Or was someone else watching the compound? Inside, arguments broke out. Some survivors wanted the strangers gone immediately. Others urged patience. Without them, survival might be impossible, and the recent surge in undead activity demanded every hand. Elias caught Mara's eye one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon. "We don't want trouble," he said quietly. "We just want safety, like you." "Then tell me why Liam is hiding things," Mara replied sharply. "And why the footprints lead away from here." Elias hesitated, then looked away. "I don't know. I swear." The night brought a new threat. Groans and shrieks from outside shattered the uneasy calm. The dead were gathering at the fence, their numbers swelling with terrifying speed. Sam barked orders, rallying the survivors to reinforce the barricades. The strangers were pressed into duty, working alongside those who barely trusted them. Mara caught Liam watching the chaos with a strange gleam in his eye. Later, she found him near the gate, fiddling with a loose plank. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Liam froze. "Nothing." But Mara wasn't convinced. That night, the sabotage became clear. A section of the fence had been weakened, one of the boards was splintered, nails pulled loose. Someone had been trying to let the dead in. The group was thrown into chaos. Fingers pointed, voices rose. Who could betray them? Could it be one of the strangers? Or worse, one of their own? Jace confronted Liam the next morning. "Why did you weaken the fence?" he demanded. Liam's eyes darted wildly. "I didn't." But a sudden noise cut him off, a scream from the edge of the compound. Everyone rushed out to find a young survivor pinned under debris, a walker closing in. Without hesitation, Elias lunged forward, driving his makeshift spear through the creature's skull. The survivors stared, stunned by his courage. "That was reckless," Sam growled. "But it saved her." Trust wavered between suspicion and relief. As the sun rose, a secret came to light. Mara found a torn piece of paper hidden in Liam's backpack, a crude map with markings that didn't match their location. Strange symbols circled an area deep in the forest, far from any known safe zones. "Why carry this?" Mara asked, holding the map up. Liam's face paled. I was told to find something there." "By who?" "I don't know." The others gathered, the weight of the discovery sinking in. Could the strangers be searching for something dangerous? Or leading enemies to their doorstep? Suddenly, the radio crackled again. The voice was clearer this time, distorted but unmistakable. "Survivors, beware, not all who seek refuge are friend." Static swallowed the message. Mara's stomach churned. The dead were outside. The strangers had secrets. And now, a warning from the void. The gate had brought safety, but also questions. And in dead America, questions could be as deadly as the dead themselves. Night fell heavy and cold over the compound, swallowing the small town in darkness thicker than the blackest ink. Inside, the survivors kept watch, every pair of eyes scanning the fence lines, every ear straining for the slightest sound. The unease that had settled in over days now churned into full-blown dread. Mara stood near the gate, the weight of her shotgun comforting but not enough to calm her racing heart. She cast a quick glance toward the storage shed where Elias and Liam were held under strict guard. Suspicion still clung to them like a shadow, but tonight, something else loomed, something far worse. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic snap echoed from the fence. The survivors froze, breath caught in throats. "Fence breach!" Jace shouted, sprinting toward the noise. Mara followed, shotgun raised. At the fence's edge, the weakened plank Liam had fiddled with earlier was missing, torn away completely. Beyond the gap, a snarling walker pushed through, dragging its mangled limbs as it lurched forward. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, a surge of undead poured into the compound, their groans drowning out everything else. Chaos erupted. Barricades. Get the gates closed. Sam barked. Survivors scrambled, shouting orders, grabbing weapons, trying desperately to stem the flood. But the dead were fast, and some were unnervingly coordinated, almost like they were being guided. In the chaos, Mara spotted Liam slipping away toward the woods, a faint glint in his hand. "Liam," she yelled, but he disappeared between the trees. "Saboteur." Jace growled, eyes blazing with fury. "He's the traitor." Elias was cornered by two survivors who accused him loudly, but he held up his hands, desperate to speak. "I didn't do this. Liam's the one." But words meant little in the heat of battle. As the dead pressed closer, the gate shook under their weight. The survivors fought tooth and nail, but one by one, the barricades faltered. Mara fired round after round, the noise deafening, but for every walker she dropped, two more took its place. Suddenly, a piercing scream rang out. Mara turned to see Sam grappling with a walker that had slipped past the line. His grip faltered, and the beast lunged. Without thinking, Elias dove forward, knocking Sam aside and driving his spear deep into the walker's skull. The moment was brief, Sam's gratitude was shadowed by distrust, but it bought precious seconds to regroup. The survivors pulled back toward the inner compound, locking gates behind them. Heavy breaths steamed in the cold air as they counted their losses, 2 injured, 1 missing, and the gate compromised. "Liam's gone," Mara said grimly. "We need to find him, and fast." Sam nodded. "But first, we secure the perimeter. No one else gets in." The next hours were tense and silent, the survivors keeping close watch. Mara's mind raced. Liam's betrayal was worse than she'd feared, but why? What was he after? At dawn, Mara and a small group set out into the woods, tracking the faint footprints Liam had left. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves replaced by an unnatural stillness. Suddenly, the group stumbled upon a clearing. There, half buried in mud and leaves, was a small metal box, rusted but intact. Mara knelt and pried it open. Inside, a handful of strange devices lay tangled, wires, a small radio transmitter, and a flash drive. "What is this?" Jace asked, eyes narrowing. "Evidence," Mara replied. Something Liam was hiding. Before they could examine further, a distant noise pulled their attention, a rough voice shouting from deeper in the woods. "Help! Over here!" They exchanged wary looks. Could it be Liam? Or a trap? Moving cautiously, the group followed the voice, hearts pounding. Through the underbrush, they found Liam, kneeling beside a wounded man, clutching a bloodied shirt. "I didn't want this," Liam said hurriedly. "I was trying to signal, to warn others." Mara lowered her gun, confused. "Warn who?" she asked. Liam swallowed hard. "There's a group out there. Not like us. They don't want to survive. They want to control." They sent me to find a way inside, but I didn't know the plan was to open the gate for the dead. His confession cut through the tension. The dead attack had been deliberate, a strategy to weaken defenses. But why come here? Why risk your own life? Mara pressed. Liam looked away. Because I want out. Because I don't trust them. Suddenly, the radio crackled again, breaking the fragile silence. The voice was clearer now, urgent. Survivors, the gate is no longer safe. Trust no one but your own. The end is coming. Static swallowed the message. The group stood frozen. The forest no longer felt safe. The dead were relentless. And the living, with their secrets and betrayals, were even more dangerous. Mara stared into the dark woods, the weight of the night pressing down. The gate had been breached once. How many times more would they survive? The sun barely pierced the gray sky when Mara's group returned to the compound, their faces grim and hearts heavier than before. The metal box and Liam's desperate confession had shaken them all, stirring an unease that would not be easily quieted. Inside, the survivors gathered in the old church, their meeting place and sanctuary. Sam paced at the front, his jaw tight, eyes sharp. We need answers, he said. We can't afford another breach. Not with what's out there. Mara stepped forward, holding the radio transmitter. This was hidden with Liam. He was sent here by a group. Not just any group, but one that wants to control, not survive. A murmur ran through the crowd. Who are they? Jace demanded. Where are they? No one knows, Mara admitted. But they're close. And they're dangerous. The survivors exchanged wary glances. The thought that enemies lurked within or near their safe zone was terrifying. The gate had brought strangers, and those strangers had brought betrayal. Elias sat silently in the corner, eyes distant. Mara caught his gaze for a moment, searching for any hint of trust. Why didn't you tell us sooner? She asked quietly. Elias hesitated. I wanted to. But Liam threatened me. He said if I told, they'd come for me, and for this place. Sam slammed a fist into his palm. Then we deal with the threat. No more secrets. The group decided to fortify the compound, repair the fence, and double the patrols. But fear gnawed at them all, an invisible enemy lurking not just beyond the walls, but potentially inside them. As night fell, the survivors took their positions. Mara and Jace patrolled near the gate, eyes scanning the dark woods. The shadows seemed to shift and move, alive with silent menace. Suddenly, a faint flicker caught Mara's eye, a shadow slipping between trees, just beyond the light of their flashlights. Did you see that? She whispered. Jace nodded, signaling the others to hold. A soft crunch of leaves, a whisper of movement. The group moved slowly forward, guns raised. Then, a figure stepped into the clearing, a woman, ragged and wild-eyed. Please, she gasped. I'm not one of them. Mara lowered her gun slightly, but suspicion burned inside her. Who sent you? Jace asked. The woman's eyes darted nervously. I escaped. From the group Liam mentioned. They're coming. They want this place. The survivors tightened their formation. Why should we believe you? Mara asked. Because I have proof. The woman reached into her torn jacket and pulled out a small device, a crude transmitter, similar to the one found in Liam's pack. This is theirs, she said. They use it to track and control the dead. They're planning an attack. Soon. The room fell silent. Sam frowned deeply. If that's true, we have to prepare. But first, we find their base. Plans were made quickly. A small team, including Mara, Jace, Elias, and the woman, who introduced herself as Claire, would scout the nearby woods, searching for any sign of the hostile group. Before leaving, Mara looked back at the compound, the faces of those who depended on her flickering in the dim light. This isn't just survival anymore, she said to herself. It's war. The forest greeted them with an eerie stillness as they moved cautiously along a narrow path. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves put them on edge. Claire led the way, following a rough map etched into her memory. Hours passed, shadows lengthened, and doubts crept in. Suddenly, Claire stopped. "Here," she whispered. They approached a hidden clearing, and Mara's breath caught. There, half buried in mud and covered in tangled vines, was a cluster of old vehicles, some military, others civilian, all surrounded by crude barricades. And worse, dead bodies, both fresh and rotting, chained to poles like trophies. "This is their base," Claire said grimly. Jace scanned the perimeter. "We're not the only ones watching." From the underbrush, the snap of a branch. "Ambush!" Mara shouted. They dropped into cover as figures emerged, armed, ruthless, eyes hard and cold. The enemy had found them first. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the trees. Mara ducked behind a fallen log, returning fire, heart pounding. Elias fought with desperate strength, holding back attackers who pushed closer. Claire shouted directions, moving quickly to flank the enemy. But the odds were against them. A stray bullet grazed Mara's arm, burning hot. "Fall back!" Jace yelled. They retreated through the forest, wounded but alive, the enemy's shouts ringing behind them. Back at the compound, they regrouped, the weight of the encounter settling like a stone. Sam met them at the gate. "They're coming," he said simply. Mara nodded, her resolve hardening. "They want control," she said, "but we fight for freedom. For everyone still alive." The night was long and dark, but the fire inside the survivors burned brighter than ever. In dead America, trust was a weapon. And tonight, Mara knew they'd need every ounce of it to survive what was coming. The compound was restless. The cold wind howled through broken windows, rattling loose boards as the survivors gathered inside the church to nurse wounds and plan their next move. The firefight in the forest had left more than bruises and bullets, it had cracked the fragile sense of safety they'd clung to since the gate's breach. Mara sat silently, her arm throbbing where the bullet grazed her skin. She wiped the sweat and dirt from her brow and stared across the room at Elias. His face was stoic, but his eyes betrayed the same turmoil she felt, questions, doubts, and the creeping paranoia that whispered, "Who can you trust?" Sam stood before the group, voice low but firm. "They've made it clear, they're organized, armed, and willing to kill for control. We're not just fighting the dead anymore. We're fighting people who want to own this world." Jace shifted beside Mara. "And what about Liam? He disappeared after the breach. Could he be working with them?" Before anyone could answer, a sharp rap sounded at the church's door. Every head turned. Sam motioned for silence and cautiously opened it. A figure stumbled inside, a young woman, bruised and bleeding, clutching a bloodied cloth to her side. "Help, please," she gasped. The crowd parted to let her through. Mara knelt beside her, recognizing the symbol stitched into the woman's torn jacket, a mark they'd seen on the weapons of their attackers in the woods. "What happened?" Mara asked urgently. "They caught me," the woman whispered. "Tried to force me to join. I escaped, but they have a spy here. Someone feeding them information." The room grew colder. Sam's voice dropped to a deadly calm. "A spy?" Mara's mind raced. How deep did this betrayal run? Who among them was the enemy? She scanned every familiar face, the weary, the hopeful, the frightened, and wondered if any were hiding knives in their hearts. The wounded woman coughed, then looked Mara in the eye. "You need to check the supplies. Someone's been tampering. Weapons disappearing. Food, poisoned." "Poisoned?" Jace's voice cracked. "Enough to kill," she said. The survivors exchanged uneasy glances. Their sanctuary was cracking from within. Mara stood, voice steady. "We'll split into teams. One searches for the spy. One checks supplies. We can't afford another surprise." The group moved silently, the weight of suspicion thick in the air. Mara joined the supply team, led by Claire and a few others. The storage shed had become a fortress, locked, guarded, and now a source of fear. Inside, the group inspected every crate, every shelf. Claire pulled out a torn bag of dried meat, eyes wide. "This smells off." Mara tore open the bag, inhaling the sour stench. "Someone tried to poison us." "We need to find out who," Claire said. They scoured the records, old journals, inventory logs, notes scribbled in haste. One name kept cropping up, Tomas, a survivor who had kept to himself since arrival. Mara's gut twisted. Tomas was quiet but capable. He'd never raised suspicion, until now. "We check on Tomas," Mara ordered. Meanwhile, Jace and the search team combed the compound, questioning anyone who might be linked to the attackers. Fear twisted their words, creating more shadows than answers. Back in the supply shed, Mara's team moved silently toward Tomas's small cabin at the edge of the compound. The night pressed down as they approached. Mara knocked firmly on the door. "Who's there?" Tomas's voice was sharp, defensive. "It's Mara. We need to talk." The door creaked open a crack. Tomas's eyes were cold, calculating. "What do you want?" "We know about the poisoning," Mara said bluntly. "And the spy." Tomas's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think it's me? You don't know what you're dealing with." Before Mara could react, Tomas slammed the door, forcing them back. "We're not done," she said, determination burning. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Chaos exploded as Tomas fled into the woods, gunfire chasing his silhouette. Mara and the others gave pursuit, heart pounding, breath ragged. The forest was thick, shadows twisting with every step. They cornered Tomas near a shallow ravine. He raised his weapon, eyes wild. "Don't make me do this," Mara called. But Tomas fired first. The bullet grazed Jace's arm. Mara dove for cover, returning fire. Tomas stumbled and fell, the fight draining from his eyes. Cuffing him quickly, Mara's voice was steady but cold. "You're coming back with us." The truth spilled out fast. Tomas was indeed a spy, working under threats from the hostile group. He'd poisoned supplies to weaken the compound before the attackers arrived. But he feared what would happen if he disobeyed. Back at the compound, Tomas was locked away, and the survivors breathed a collective sigh of relief. Yet, Mara knew the war was far from over. The enemy was close, ruthless, and inside their walls. And in dead America, trust was the most dangerous weapon of all. The cold dawn barely stirred the fog hanging over the compound as Mara stood silently by the barred door where Tomas sat, his face shadowed with defeat and fear. The revelations from the night before clung to the survivors like a bitter chill. Trust was shattered, and suspicion hung heavier than the looming threat beyond their walls. Inside the cramped room, Tomas's eyes flicked nervously to Mara. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. They made me do it." Mara's voice was calm but firm. "Who are they, Tomas? Who's behind this?" His lips trembled, but the weight of the moment forced his confession. "There's a faction, deeper in the ruins of the city. They call themselves the Redeemers. They believe the dead should be controlled, not killed. They use the walkers as weapons. They sent me here to weaken you, to prepare your compound for takeover." The room fell silent, the horror of his words sinking in. Sam's hand tightened on the door frame. "Using the dead as weapons. It's worse than we thought." Mara's mind raced. The Redeemers weren't just enemies, they were fanatics with a terrifying plan. "We need to find their base," Mara said, determination flaring in her eyes. "If we don't stop them, they'll crush us." Claire stepped forward. "I can help. I know the ruins, they have strongholds deep in the city's underground tunnels." Jace nodded, grim. "Then we take the fight to them." The survivors prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. Mara gathered a small team, herself, Claire, Jace, Elias, and Sam, to venture into the city's heart and uncover the Redeemers' secrets. The air was thick with tension as they slipped through the compound gate before sunrise, the city looming ahead like a dark beast waiting to devour them. The streets were a graveyard of silence and decay. Skyscrapers stood as hollowed skeletons, windows shattered, and walls scarred by fire. The only sound was their footsteps, echoing against the broken pavement. Claire led them toward a battered subway entrance, hidden beneath layers of debris. "The Redeemers used the tunnels to move unseen," she said. "Their weapons, they're dead, they're all down there." Lighting their flashlights, they descended into the darkness, the air stale and suffocating. The tunnels twisted and turned, a maze of shadows and silence. Suddenly, distant voices echoed, harsh, commanding. Mara motioned to stop. They crept forward, peering around a corner. Below, the Redeemers were gathered, surrounding a massive cage filled with shambling walkers, their eyes glazed and mouths snapping hungrily. A man in a tattered uniform barked orders. "Prepare the dead. We move at first light. The compound will fall." Mara's grip tightened on her weapon. "We have to act now," she whispered. But before they could move, a sharp clatter echoed behind them. "Ambush!" Claire hissed. From the shadows, Redeemer soldiers poured out, weapons raised, their faces twisted with fanatic zeal. Gunfire erupted in the cramped tunnels. Mara dove for cover, shouting orders. Elias fired steadily, covering their retreat. Jace grabbed a flare, lighting it and tossing it into the cage. The flames lit hungrily at the dry wood and metal. The walkers stirred, their groans rising in a terrifying chorus as they lunged toward the flames, snapping wildly. In the chaos, Mara's team fought their way back through the tunnels, the Redeemers in fierce pursuit. They burst into daylight gasping, hearts pounding, skin slick with sweat and grime. Sam and others waited anxiously. "We destroyed their weapons cache," Mara said breathlessly. "But this isn't over. They're organized, and they're coming." Claire shook her head. "The Redeemers believe the dead are the future. They won't stop until they control everything." That night, as the survivors huddled around fires, the city's distant sirens began to wail, an eerie reminder of a world gone mad. Mara stared into the flames, thoughts swirling. The Redeemers were more than enemies, they were a nightmare born from the dead itself. And the fight for dead America had only just begun. The moon hung low, casting long shadows over the compound. Silence wrapped the survivors like a thin, fragile blanket, but none dared to trust the calm. Mara paced the perimeter, her senses sharpened by sleepless nights and growing dread. The Redeemers' threat was no longer distant, it was breathing down their necks. Inside, whispers rippled like poison. Tomas's betrayal had ignited paranoia. Eyes flicked nervously at friends and neighbors, every smile shadowed by suspicion. Mara's thoughts churned. The compound was vulnerable, enemy spies had already poisoned their supplies, and the Redeemers used the dead as weapons. They needed allies, but trust was in short supply. Sam joined her outside, his gaze scanning the darkness. "We can't fight a war if we're tearing ourselves apart." Mara nodded. But the spy could still be here, feeding them info, waiting for the right moment. A sudden commotion erupted near the gate. Mara and Sam rushed toward the noise, weapons ready. A small group of survivors had caught someone sneaking through the shadows, one of their own, a man named Nolan. He struggled, eyes wild. "I'm not a spy," he shouted. "I swear." But the wounds told a different story. Bruises and cuts marred his face, evidence of interrogation, or worse. Mara stepped forward. "Why were you sneaking around the gates, Nolan? Who are you working for?" Nolan's breath trembled. "I'm just trying to survive. I saw them out there, the Redeemers. They promised me safety, food. I didn't want to betray anyone, but I had no choice." Sam's voice was cold. "You made a choice. And now we have to deal with it." Nolan's shoulders slumped. "Please, don't kill me. I can help you. I know their plans, where they'll strike next." The crowd's anger simmered, but Mara raised a hand. "We'll hear him out. But if he betrays us again, there will be no mercy." Inside the church, Nolan recounted what he'd learned, a new target, a weak point in their defenses at the northern wall. the Redeemers planned a massive attack at dawn. The survivors sprang into action, reinforcing barricades and preparing for the worst. Mara gathered her trusted team, Claire, Jace, Elias, and Sam. "We need to stop them before they breach," she said. "We can't afford to wait." The night dragged on, heavy with tension. Mara's thoughts drifted to Liam, the stranger who started this all. Was he still alive? Had he been another pawn in this deadly game? As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, distant groans echoed, unnatural and chilling. The attack had begun. From the treeline, a wave of undead surged forward, driven and controlled by the Redeemers' commands. The compound exploded into chaos, gunfire, screams, and the sickening sound of bodies falling. Mara fought with fierce determination, side by side with her team. Claire covered the flank, picking off attackers with deadly precision. Jace charged through the undead, clearing a path. Elias and Sam reinforced the barricades, buying time. Amid the battle, Mara spotted a figure moving stealthily toward the command post, Liam. Her heart leapt. Was he friend or foe? She pursued him through the smoke and blood, weapons raised. "Liam," she called. He turned, eyes haunted but sincere. "I'm here to help." Before she could respond, a sudden explosion rocked the compound, throwing Mara to the ground. Dazed, she looked up to see the northern wall breached, Redeemers pouring through the gap. "Hold the line!" Sam shouted. Mara scrambled up, rallying survivors. Liam moved to her side. "We can stop them, but we need to shut down their control over the walkers." "How?" Mara demanded. "The transmitter," Liam said urgently. "It's in their camp. If we destroy it, the walkers will turn on them." Mara nodded, decision made. "We take the fight to them," she said. The survivors prepared for a desperate counterattack, knowing the fate of their home, and possibly humanity, depended on it. That's part 7, packed with suspense, betrayal, and intense action, exactly 795 words. Ready to continue with part 8? The sun was just a pale glow on the horizon when Mara gathered the survivors for the final push. Their faces were tired, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights and unending battles. Yet beneath the exhaustion burned a fierce resolve. Their home, their lives, and their very humanity depended on what they did next. Liam stepped forward, clutching a crude map he'd sketched from memory. "The transmitter is deep inside their main camp. We'll have to move fast and quiet." Mara's voice was steady, commanding. "Claire, you and Elias will cover our rear. Sam, Jace, you're with me. Liam, you lead us to the transmitter." The group moved through the ruins of dead America like ghosts, silent, purposeful, every shadow a potential enemy. The Redeemers' camp was a twisted fortress of rusted metal and stolen technology, surrounded by restless walkers wired and controlled to guard the perimeter. Mara's heart pounded as they approached the outer defenses. Claire and Elias set traps along the back path, while Mara's team prepared for a frontal assault. The first alarms blared, a harsh mechanical howl that shattered the silence. The walkers surged forward, their movements jerky but relentless. Gunfire erupted as the survivors fought their way through, dodging the snapping jaws and relentless fists of the undead. Liam guided them to a battered communications tower at the heart of the camp. The transmitter hummed with a sinister power. Suddenly, from the shadows emerged the Redeemer leader, a man with cold eyes and a cruel smile. "So, the little resistance thinks it can end us," he sneered, raising a weapon. Mara's voice was ice. "Your reign ends here." The two sides clashed violently, the camp erupting in gunfire, screams, and the groans of the dead. Mara fought with desperate fury, each strike fueled by the memory of those lost and the hope of those still alive. Jace and Sam held off reinforcements, buying time as Claire and Elias disabled the walker controls. Liam reached the transmitter, rigging it with explosives. The leader charged Mara, a brutal struggle unfolding beneath the flickering lights. With a final surge, Mara disarmed him, knocking the weapon away. "Give up," she demanded. His laugh was bitter. "You think this ends with me? The dead will rise again." The countdown beeped in Liam's ears. "No," Mara said firmly. "This ends now." The explosives detonated with a thunderous roar, sending shockwaves through the camp. The walkers convulsed, then collapsed lifeless. The Redeemers screamed in panic and rage, their control shattered. Mara's team seized the moment, pushing forward and routing the enemy. By midday, the camp was silent except for the distant wind. The survivors gathered outside the ruins, battered but alive. Mara looked over them, pride and sorrow mingling in her gaze. "We fought not just for survival," she said softly, "but for trust, for hope, for the future." Liam stepped beside her. "Dead America is still broken, but we've taken the first step toward rebuilding." The road ahead was uncertain, but together, they would face whatever came next. Because in a world where strangers came to the gate, only trust could keep the living alive. That completes your story, Strangers at the Gate. Who can you trust in Dead America? Zombies audiobook in 8 suspenseful, engaging parts. Each part is crafted in a third-person style, packed with tension and perfectly suited for your YouTube audience and monetization. If you want, I can help with narrations, video ideas, or AI image prompts next.